this is Samantha. I'm here with my October mid-month wrap-up. Should I be doing one? No, but I'm still doing one. Hi, it is the middle of the month, and normally I tend to do mid-month wrap-ups when I've read 5 or more books halfway through the month, so my end of the month wrap-ups don't end up being too long. Now, I've only read 4 books this month so far, and I don't see myself reading a whole lot more in the second half of the month, but I still wanted to make this video because even though I feel like October has been flying by, like I don't know where this past week went, generally I don't. But besides just the month completely flying by, I do have a feeling when I look at these 2 physical books. I have 2 physical to e-books. The 2 physical books I read at the very beginning of the month. If I look at them, I'm like, I don't remember that much about my thoughts. I can't articulate it very well because it feels like forever ago. So I know that by the end of the month it's going to be way worse. So, wish me luck. Let's just begin. The first book I finished in the month of October is The Last Book of the White by Cassandra, Clare, and Wesley. This is the second book in the Ellis Curses series. The Ellis Curses is a trilogy of books following Magnus and Alec doing different adventures over the whole Shadowhunter timeline. The first book took place somewhere in the Model Instrument series. I'm not exactly sure where. This one takes place a couple of months after the Shadowhunter Academy novella bind-up, and this follows Magnus and Alec going for some reason, and I'm not going to tell you because of spoilers, to Shanghai, and they take along the Model Instruments cast, basically like the main core group of friends. And yeah, gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't know if I said that already, but mainly I still really enjoyed this book because I feel like this cast of characters is my favorite to hang out with. Even though like only Magnus is the one that's like in like my top characters from this entire group, and I prefer characters from like different series, I do, in just like its completeness, this group of characters is like my favorite to hang out with. Their friendships and like their family dynamics and everything just really works for me, and I like seeing them hanging out. And a big chunk of this book was that the characters just like hanging out, and again being a little bit older than in the original series, and even though we've seen them after as well, so even older. I feel like in the Dog Artifices mainly, and the Dog Artifices they're side characters, so you don't see that much of them. Like, don't see them interacting as much as in this book where they're main characters. So it was really enjoyable to read that, and I feel like that's where I got most of my love from this book from. And also just Magnus and Alec at this point in their relationship is just like A tier, no, S tier. That's the best while like the tier rankings, right? I don't know. The main problem I had with this book is that I just felt like this was a setup book, like an in-between novel in between from the first book and the next one. I'm very excited for the third one because what is set up in this is mind-blowing, and I want to know what happens. And there is the one small thing that I think might be a tie-in to the Last Hours, I believe it's called, like the Shade of Gold series. And if that is what I think it is, I'm very excited. So this did get me very hyped for other books in the series, but I feel like this book itself was just setting up a lot of things, and also feel like there were a lot of high action moments that were supposed to be very high stakes, but because we've seen these characters in the future, we kind of know what happens to them, so they don't really feel that high stakes to me. Then the next book I read is 10 Things I Hate About Pinky by Sandhya Menon. This is the last book in the Dimple and Rishi's companion series. The series is a companion series, so each book officially stands on its own, but if you don't want to get spoiled at all, I recommend reading them in order, but for the rest you could read them in any order. Okay, this one in particular follows Pinky, who is kind of seen as like a rebel by her family, like the outcast, the black sheep, and on summer break she goes with her parents and her aunt and her uncle and her cousin to Cape Cod, like they do every summer. And after something happens there, she decides to start a fake relationship to convince her parents that she isn't as bad as they think she is. So she contacts Samir, and Samir at the beginning of this novel, he has a very close relationship with his mother, but his mother is a little bit controlling over him, and to get out of it, at the beginning of this novel he has got an internship in DC at a law firm because he wants to be a lawyer in the future. And as he gets there, on the first day his internship is supposed to start, his internship just falls through very unexpectedly, and Lily gets his message from Pinky to be her fake boyfriend, and he takes it because her mother is a very important lawyer and he is hoping for an internship with her. It's a hate to love fake dating story, which I'm supposed to love. Those are two of my favorite tropes. I love those tropes. And we met both of these characters in a previous novel and I really liked them in that. And Sandhya and Menon has never done me one on cute romances, but I hated this romance. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars in its completion because I do really like some other elements to this book, but the romance I hated. If you watch my vlogs, you know I went on a bit of a rant on Sandhya in the beginning that I dropped off of because I thought I was going too much into spoilers, but the beginning is pretty spoiler free. Whoo! I quickly started to hate Samir. It was pretty, I feel like he was just toxic and mean. I know hate to love is supposed to be a little bit mean in the beginning. And Pinky did also have that, but Pinky generally came from like this point of like either like self-defense or just like, I don't understand this human being and I want to try and understand him, you know, came from that place still. Being like, this is weird, but people are weird for a reason, so let me try and understand that. While Samir just had like this idea in his mind of what Pinky was and made that like the most terrible kind of human being for him. And Pinky proved time and time again that she wasn't that, and he was still like, oh, she's terrible. And I absolutely hated that, and I feel like that mindset didn't really change going into the relationship. Eventually, yes, he did with the flip of a switch from I hate her to I love her, but I feel like that attitude of like she's a terrible human being was still there in like the back of his mind in a way, which was very easily seen through like his actions towards Pinky, and I hated that and it never got addressed. So yeah, fuck the relationship. But I think what was actually a bigger part in this novel and the thing that kept me reading, because I read this in one sitting and I've been in a bit of a slump since I started school, so that's impressive, but what kept me reading is Pinky's individual storyline. This book is very heavily focused on Pinky and her relationship with her parents and her family and her activism and just being who she is and being seen as actively doing things to annoy her parents. Well, that's not a thing that ever crosses her mind. She just does things because she's passionate about them. And the discussion around that was done so well. Pinky was a phenomenal character and I loved her so much. I've said this before, but Sandhya is really good at exploring complicated family relationships without directly villainizing the parents, which I also really like, because I feel like it's often just going to be like, oh, these parents absolutely don't care about that kid, well actually they do, they just express it in a wrong way, you know what I mean? And I really like how Sandhya shows that, and I really appreciate that as well. In this novel it's done so well. It's really much more to the forefront than in her other novels, and I just really enjoyed that. Then the next book I read is my best friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix, which I give 2 out of 5 stars. This book takes place in the 80s and we follow our main character who is like the poor friend in a group of witcher friends, and then one day they go out to try acid because they're dumb. No, they just go out to try acid with the 4 of them, and they end up actually getting an acid that isn't actually acid. It doesn't work except on one person who is our main character's like best friend, and she seems to have a really bad trip, but in reality she actually got possessed. And then in the novel kind of a lot of things happen, and yeah, we try and figure out what really happened to her. And I don't know, I don't want to say much more because I think it will be spoilery. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars, like I said before. I read Horror Store by the same author earlier in the year, and I really loved it. It's got me interested in trying more horror, so I was really excited to try this book because I heard some more things about this and great things about this. And I was a little bit disappointed, but I kind of felt mad about it. I do have like 2 major problems with it that might have contributed to the fact, and that's that I felt like a lot of the characters were very one-dimensional and felt very flat, and it was hard to distinguish between them a couple of times, so that was annoying. And then also at points I just had no clue what was really going on, and like character motivations and everything were just thrown out of the window, and there was like little gaps, like time gaps, which I get that they're there because, you know, you need to further the story along. I get that there's like time jumps, but I feel like because of those time jumps there was a lot of times things that weren't explained well that happened. I don't know, like for example at one point in the friend group these 2 friends absolutely hate the character that got possessed, and then like a chapter later they're like best friends with that character, and it's never explained what really happened to reconcile that, and that was very, very annoying in my opinion. And stuff like that happened a couple of times, and that just kept me from being completely pulled into the story. That's eventually why I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, because I do think it is a fun story, which sounds weird because it is a bit more on the horror side, but just like horror store, it's kind of more on like the, not necessarily comedy horror store, it's more like on the comedy side as well. This one isn't really, but it's still like on a fun, lighthearted like horror scale, which I appreciate. As someone who's trying to get into horror, I really appreciate this. But I would still recommend this book, but I just didn't really feel that compelled reading it. And the last book I have to talk about today is the Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. I gave this 4 stars. This book is hard to explain without spoiling anything, but basically it starts off with these 2 characters who are parents opening the door and finding their son dead. And the novel, it's a short book. The novel like spends its time trying to find out what happened to this character. We go back in time as well to see them living in a way, I don't know. I think the struggles with gender identity and sexuality, and we also like get to see the grieving process of his parents and his friends. So yeah, I don't really want to say that much more. I know that's a terrible description, but I don't want to say much more because I feel like it will spoil anything, because I feel like the reason I give this 4 stars, I feel like it left you in the dark for a very long time, and then in the ending like everything like clicked, which I feel like how it was done was brilliantly, but and it's also not a linear timeline, so how everything is done is absolutely brilliant. It's the best way this should have been told, but because I was so confused throughout a big chunk of the book, I had to give it 4 stars, not 5 stars. But I still highly recommend this. I got this I skipped a very important point. I got this as a galley, to a galley. I did get accepted for it like after the release, so it's taking me a while to get around to it, but I did. I read Pet by Akwaeke Emezi earlier this year as well, I think, or last year, I don't remember when I read it. Time is a weird concept, but I really enjoyed that one. I loved that one a lot. It made me interested in checking this one out, and yeah, again, I think it's really well done. I feel like Akwaeke Emezi as an author just deserves more hype, because I've only read 2 books by them, but brilliantly done, and highly recommend them. They discuss very important topics in a very good way. I don't really have a lot to say about this because I feel like it's hard to discuss without spoiling it, but it is really good, and it's short, it's a quick read. It discusses a lot of important topics, talks about grief, about gender identity, about sexuality, and yeah, that's all I have to talk about for today. If you read any of these books, let me know in the comments below what you thought of them, as well as some of the books you read so far in the month of October, and I hope I still have enough things to talk to you about at the end of the month. Fingers crossed. I guess I'll see you guys next time.
Here I am again, the same old situation. Why does the God thing have to be so complicated?